Today, I want to talk about the term opportunity cost when it comes to the criminal justice system or government investigations. And the reason I'm making this video is because I had a conversation a little bit earlier today with a young man who was recently convicted after a trial. And as a result of that conviction, he is now waiting for a sentencing hearing. So we are talking about what are the different procedures that are going to come. And as we had this conversation, he was really expressing his hopes that he would either, one, win on a Rule 29 motion, which effectively asks a judge to reconsider the verdict and potentially issue a directed verdict indicating that the person is not really guilty, that there was not enough evidence to prove him guilty. And so while he's waiting for a Rule 29 ruling on a Rule 29 from the judge, he's also contemplating the concept of hiring a new attorney or a new law firm to file an appeal on his behalf. The question is, how do opportunity costs come into play here? And we got into a rather long conversation because this guy is really relatively young. He's in his early 30s. He's had a successful career in sales of medical durable goods and pharmaceutical equipment and other types of products that service the healthcare industry. But authorities charged him with a crime. And that indictment had numerous counts. But he made a choice of going to trial. He didn't ever pursue the possibility of pleading guilty, accepting responsibility, creating a mitigation strategy, working to move on with his life. And as a result of the choice that he made, he has effectively been living in prison with this cloud hanging over his head, or as I've written in numerous books, it's like the sword of Damocles that's hanging over somebody's neck. You know, you remember that cartoon where the sword's just going back and forth and inching lower, and you know it's coming on. I can tell you when that's happening to somebody, it's effectively like you are serving a sentence right now, but the time is not counting. Instead, it keeps moving forward. And so my advice to anybody who is going through a government investigation or facing any type of challenge with the judicial system is to begin thinking about opportunity costs. Because if a person goes to trial, the costs of going to trial are numerous. And I'm not only talking about monetary expenses. Those monetary expenses can run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars or very easily the millions of dollars. That's an opportunity cost you've got to be thinking about. Because if you go to trial and you lose, you've got to be thinking about what else is going to come as a result of that loss in the trial. But let's just try to get to the trial. What happens? Well, first, there's a government investigation. Second, that for many turns into a criminal investigation. And that means you're first hiring civil attorneys, and those civil attorneys are very likely charging fees in excess of $500 or $600 an hour. And sometimes there's 2 or 3 attorneys on the case, each of whom is charging $500 to $600 an hour or more. So your burn rate on legal fees could very easily be $1,500 an hour for 10 hours a day. That's $15,000 a day in pretrial preparation. And what's going on during this pretrial preparation period? It's called discovery. So during this trial, in preparation of the trial, the defense attorneys are going to want to review every email. They're going to want to review every sales script. They're going to want to review every advertisement. They're going to want to review every interaction with consumers. They're going to want to review bank accounts. They're going to want to review sales contracts. They're going to want to listen to tapes. They're going to want to interview people. And all of that comes at an enormous cost. What am I saying? Opportunity costs. Remember that if the federal government or state government or any authority charges an individual or brings a government investigation against somebody, it is effectively being brought into a war. And that war can escalate from a civil investigation into a criminal investigation. And in that case, you've got a group of prosecutors now who are bringing evidence together to go before a grand jury, and they are presenting this evidence to a grand jury who's going to consider it without any explanation from you, because neither you nor your defense attorney has an opportunity to tell a different side of the story. So the members of the grand jury are just listening to this evidence as prosecutors pile it on, spinning this matter to make you look really, really bad. And so the members of the grand jury, not having anything else to decide, take this evidence, and when the prosecutor says, now we would like you to return an indictment against this person, the grand jury says, sure, and they indict. And that's the reason that Alan Dershowitz is famous for having said that a grand jury could indict a ham sandwich if the prosecutor asked them to. There's just no defense against it. So that's an opportunity cost to be thinking about if you have been brought into a government investigation. Why? Because you could be thinking about, well, I know that if I go to trial, I've got the possibility of being convicted. And if I am convicted, my penalties are going to be significantly higher than if I chose a different route. And that other route could be, instead of pleading not guilty and going to trial, pursue a completely different tack. And that different or tactic, that other tactic may be working toward an effective plea agreement. And that plea agreement may say, I'm going to accept responsibility. I am going to work to mitigate the punishment against me. I'm going to work to help all of the stakeholders, the judge, the prosecutor, the probation officer, the people I'm going to encounter in prison, the people I'm going to face on the other side of this journey, because your opportunity costs are now. If you have become the target of investigation today, you have an opportunity cost. You are going to begin making decisions that have an enormous influence on your future, not only with regard to financial costs of the hundreds of thousands or potentially millions of dollars you're going to be spending to defend yourself, but in addition to that, you're going to have your liberty on the line. Not only are you going to have your liberty on the line, you're going to have your reputation on the line. And we want you to be thinking about all of those opportunity costs as early as possible. Now, the person with whom I spoke today, he was already convicted in a trial, but he has a strong case, or he believes that he has a strong case, that on a Rule 29 motion, the judge will recognize that there was not enough evidence to sustain a conviction, and he may overturn the conviction. Now, if that happens, that doesn't mean he's free. All that means is he gets another swing at the bat. He's got another swing with the bat, I should say, if I'm going to use the analogy, right? He gets to step up to the plate and decide again, am I going to trial or am I going to pursue this pathway of a plea negotiation? And his statement was, well, now I already know what the government has against me, and I think I could prepare better and prevail this time in a trial, but I had to ask him, what about the opportunity costs? Because the government doesn't really want to go through another trial. What they want is a conviction. And if you prevail on a Rule 29, you're in a very good position to pursue this other tactic. And he says, well, what about an appeal? How am I going to pursue an appeal if I try to simultaneously position myself for leniency at sentencing or a mitigation strategy? It's much harder. Yes, it's much harder to ask for leniency when you are saying, I am not guilty. And I have no judgment whatsoever. I have no knowledge whether anybody is guilty or innocent. What I am saying is you've got to think about the opportunity costs with every single decision. Do I go to trial? Do I prepare an appeal? Do I accept responsibility? Do I build a story that's going to help me explain to my judge and to the stakeholders who I am and what I've learned from this experience and how I identify with victims and which of these tactics are going to result in me getting through this with my dignity intact and ready to restore my life at the soonest possible time? To the extent you think about this early, you are really taking into consideration this idea of a SWOT analysis. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What opportunities do I have? What are the threats? And we can kind of explore that in terms of a government investigation or a criminal indictment or criminal charge. The strength of going to trial is really in the hands of the government. Because if the government brings a case, if the federal government brings a case against an individual, they've already invested thousands of man hours gathering evidence and building a case that the defendant doesn't know anything about. Even if the person is absolutely innocent, the reality, unfortunately, is that it is more likely than not that a conviction will be affirmed by the court. Why? That's not my words. You can just look at the statistics yourself of how frequently a conviction follows when the federal government brings the case against an individual. It happens many more times than we would like to believe. We would like to believe that everybody is innocent until proven guilty, but that's just not reality. When the federal government brings a case, it's already very far along advanced, because who's going to make the assessment of whether somebody is guilty or not guilty? It's going to either be a jury or it's going to be the defendant himself who accepts a plea agreement. Who sits on a jury? It's generally going to be nurses, firemen. It's going to be postal workers. It's going to be citizens that are very matter of fact and can't really process this concept of United States of America versus your name. It's very hard for somebody to see that on an indictment and say, well, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and believe that this person is really innocent until proven guilty. That's just not reality. Think of your own life. Read the newspaper. When you read the case against somebody, your initial thought is, oh my God, look at what he did. It's not that, oh, well, let's just assess all the evidence. This is just human nature. When the government brings a charge, citizens generally say, well, I'm glad that's not me. This person needs to be punished. And they start with a predisposed mindset of a conviction. That's at least what I experienced as somebody who went through the system, and what I experienced after having interviewed thousands of people who went through the system. So think about that. Is the strength in your side, or is it in the government side? Now think about weakness, strength, weakness. Why are you weak if the government is launching an investigation against you? You're going to have enormous legal costs. Your liberty is at stake. You won't be able to think straight. Your family life is going to suffer. Everybody's going to be nervous. You won't know how to respond to friends. Your name is going to be dragged through the mud in the media. It's going to influence your earning power. This is a weakness. And until you can cut that weakness out and recalibrate your life and restore your confidence and your sense of purpose, you are going to be spiraling out of control, as many people experience. So we've got strengths, side of the government, weakness, side of the defendant. What are the opportunities? Well, you do have the opportunity, if you have the financial wherewithal to launch an effective defense. You may be able to be one of those maybe 15 out of 100 people who prevail in a trial, but more likely than not, you're going to be one of those 85 out of 100 that end up facing a sentencing hearing. So the opportunity is to say, let me work towards mitigation early and learn as much as I can about this system and position myself to recalibrate and get back to my life, to get back to a state of normalcy and move forward. The threat, of course, strength, side of the government, weakness, the defendant, opportunity, should I work toward a mitigation strategy? What's the threat? Well, the threat, my friend, is loss of liberty. The threat, my friend, is the prospect of serving time in prison. And in this nation of this movement of big government and government investigations and an ecosystem that needs to be fed, the mass incarceration movement that needs to continue growing, there's going to be more investigations and more people coming in. The federal government recently gave away trillions of dollars for this PPP lending program and grant program, and there's sure to be more. But just as sure, there are going to be many people who are not thinking about how the decisions they make in the course of business can lead them into the crosshairs of a government investigation and potentially into a criminal indictment. If that's you, my advice, our entire team's advice, is to be thinking about, what can I do to mitigate these problems? What can I do to make amends? What can I do to reconcile with the situation I've put myself in and save the hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars that you would be spending on legal advice, get back on track, and move towards towards a decision that will allow you to bring some normalcy to your life and move on to the next chapter. It's never too early and it's never too late to begin sowing seeds for a better life. That's a lesson that we strive to teach on our team, and we encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Look for information in the show notes that can help you. Visit our websites and do everything possible to make sure that you are considering all opportunity costs, because every decision you make has ancillary consequences. And the decisions you make today are going to be something you may have to live with for decades ahead. I am Michael Santos with Prison Professors and with Compliance Mitigation, and we encourage you to visit our sites. Please subscribe to the channel and get in touch with us if we can help you. Thank you.